Hi, welcome to this hypnotherapy session. In about 30 seconds, I'm going to disappear from the screen and the screen is going to go black to allow you to settle into it. So please sit down or lay down comfortably. Make sure your headphones are in if you've got them. Turn off any notifications on your phone. Hopefully, you've watched the short video introduction explaining what hypnotherapy is or isn't, but if you haven't, that doesn't really matter. So this screen's going to go black now, and I'd like you to settle down and enjoy the session. Thank you.
You don't need to feel relaxed yet. Nothing needs to change quickly. Just noticing yourself here, exactly as you are, is enough for now. Now some minds start busy, some already feel quieter, and many move between the two, wandering a little, and perhaps wondering without trying how ease begins. So there's no right way to do this, just only your way. And you might notice the simple fact you're here listening, not needing to go anywhere else right now. Thoughts can drift or stay close or move in and out like breath. And you don't have to mind that. You may simply notice the mind doing what it does in its own time. And at some point awareness may rest in the body, not as effort, just as presence. Parts of the body you're aware of, and parts that remain quiet in the background. As if your attention can gently feel and fill whichever space it lands on. And perhaps without planning to, you become aware of the breath. It's been there all along, arriving, leaving, doing its work piece by piece. And as your body finds a little more peace in the noticing. Most people don't notice breathing until it matters. And this might be that moment for you. Nothing forced, just the breath aware of itself again. And as you notice it, you might sense the system already knows how to settle. A slightly softer exhale, a little more room in the ribs. Or just the simple recognition that breathing happens without your help. There's no need to take a deep breath. The body will just know. And if nothing changes yet, well, that's just the work beginning. So awareness first and shift later. You might begin to feel a small softening somewhere, or the hint of heaviness, or the sense of being placed here in this moment. As thoughts begin to wander, and wonder where they go when they soften. And of course you don't have to guide it, and you don't have to follow it. Just be here. Let the mind decide how it listens, and the body decides how it rests. Because sometimes we understand something consciously, and sometimes we hear, and hear in a different way, one that doesn't need thinking to make sense. And as all that settles in its own way, when you're ready, or before even you realise you're ready, we can just begin to move just a little deeper. And now, as you continue to breathe slowly and evenly, awareness begins to drift inward. Each breath a quiet signal to the body. You can soften now. You can rest. Notice the gentle weight where your body meets the surface beneath you. Notice the air on your skin. The subtle movement of breath at the edges of your nostrils. The stillness forming around each sound. And with every breath, the body settles more deeply than before. The rhythm of breathing becomes the rhythm of calm. I'd like you now to maybe imagine yourself standing at the top of a long, smooth staircase. And it's softly lit and it's gently inviting. And it's safe. And I want you to, with each number I count, when I count them, you can take one easy step downwards. And with every step downwards, deeper down, your comfort will double. So on the 10th step, and the muscles behind the eyes relaxing. And stepping down to the 9th, you feel the shoulders release. Down through 8, and a warmth spreads through your chest and arms. Down to 7, and just breathing deeper now. To 6, and drifting further downwards. And on the 5th step, halfway down now, safe and steady. Down to 4, legs loose and heavy. And as you reach the 3rd step, the thoughts start drifting further apart. And 2 almost at the bottom now. And 1 stepping off, arriving in a space of complete stillness. And as you reach this special place, you simply pause and breathe. Each exhale draws you 1 layer deeper into comfort. You might even notice tiny details now. A faint pulse in the fingertip. A gentle rhythm of the heart. Each beat syncing with the breath. And that's okay, this is just your body learning the pattern of peace. And here awareness expands and contracts, like the slow movement of a tide. And as you inhale, a faint sense of lifting, as though light moves gently through the body. And as you exhale, a quiet descent, sinking a little deeper, a little further into calm. Each rise opens the door for a deeper fall. Each fall teaches the system that letting go is safe. Time begins to stretch now. Moments widen. The conscious mind loses its grip. You start to sense the quiet below thought. Even if you can hear background sounds, a car outside, a creak in the room, they just blend into depth. They become part of the rhythm that carries you deeper. And if you were to measure time, you'd find it shifting. Seconds expanding. Minutes dissolving into stillness. And that's good, because this is just the subconscious taking charge. And in that quiet stillness, your deeper mind can begin to show just how responsive it already is. You might like now, I don't know, simply to choose one of your hands, whichever hand feels right to you. There's no need to analyze or decide. Just notice which one your attention drifts to. And as that hand becomes the focus, bring awareness to one single finger, perhaps the first that draws your attention, perhaps another. So your mind will know which one it wishes to use. So just notice that finger now, its weight, its warmth, and of course the tiny pulse of life within it. And as you notice, you may begin to sense a faint impulse there, a soft current, a micro movement. You don't need to make it happen. In fact, you might have even tried to keep it completely still and just notice what happens anyway. Because when the subconscious mind is ready to respond, it often chooses the smallest possible signal, a twitch, a flutter, a movement so light it's almost imagined. And whether that movement happens now or a little later, the awareness of it tells you something deeper. That your mind and your body are listening to each other. And as soon as you become aware of that subtle response, or even the feeling that it could happen, you can just allow the whole hand to rest again. And as it settles, you drift twice as deep. Relaxation spreading outwards like the gentle ripples of calm. And every muscle now learning what ease feels like. Every cell remembering balance. And now as all systems begin to synchronize, breath, pulse, thought, each moving to the same slow rhythm, the deeper the mind is open. The surface mind pleasantly distant, as if two parts of you were working together perfectly. One resting, one listening, both in harmony. And it may feel as though you could stay here for 5 minutes or 5 hours. And the difference would mean nothing, because time inside calm has its own pace. What feels like a moment can be long enough for the subconscious to reset and to restore and to heal. So there's nothing to manage, nothing to prove, only the rhythm of breath, the steadiness of the heartbeat, and the feeling of drifting effortlessly in peace. And the deeper you drift, the quieter everything becomes, and the more ready you are for the work that follows, anchored, open, and completely at ease. And for others, stillness becomes deeper, solid, steady, a place to rest. Either way, that's your system responding. No pushing, no performing, just noticing what's there and their own way of responding. So let awareness settle now, where effort falls away and the body will know what to do without instruction. You aren't falling asleep, but if later something in you choose to do this, that's fine. The mind can rest and still know, without needing to know how it does this. Comfort doing the work, you simply being the space it happens in, and in its own good time. And your mind can begin to understand something now, perhaps in a slightly different way than it has understood it before, because OCD can seem complicated, different thoughts, different fears, different rituals, different themes, and yet, underneath all of those differences, there is often a remarkably similar pattern, a loop. And once a loop is understood, it can be interrupted. Something happens, perhaps a thought, an image, an impulse, a memory, a sensation, or simply feeling that something isn't quite right. And immediately the alarm system responds. What if? What if this means something? What if I've done something? What if I could do something? What if something happens? What if I've missed something? And then comes the feeling. Anxiety, doubt, discomfort, urgency. And it's that uncontrollable, uncomfortable sense that I need to do something about this. And that's the important moment. Because OCD makes the discomfort feel like the problem. But the discomfort isn't really what keeps the loop alive, it's what happens next. Perhaps you check. Perhaps you avoid. I don't know, perhaps you wash, perhaps you repeat something, perhaps you ask somebody, do you think it's okay? Are you sure? Do you think I did something wrong? Perhaps nobody else even knows you're doing anything. Because of course the compulsion happens entirely inside your own mind. Reviewing, remembering, analysing, testing, comparing, trying to work out exactly what you thought, exactly what you felt, exactly what happened, or what it might mean. Trying to reach that moment where finally you can feel certain. And then something interesting happens. For a moment, you feel better. The anxiety drops, perhaps only slightly, perhaps considerably, but something changes. Relief. And that relief feels good. So then naturally, the brain assumes the thing you just did worked. And this is where OCD's intrusive thoughts become clever. Because the compulsion really does appear to work. It produces relief. I don't know, you check the door maybe and just feel better. You seek reassurance and feel better. You do something in a sequence of numbers and feel better. So you mentally review what happened and eventually find an explanation and feel better. And because you feel better, this is what the brain learns. Good thing we checked. Good thing we worked that out. It's a good thing we asked. It's a good thing we made certain. And without ever intending to, you have taught the emotional brain that the compulsion prevented the danger. And of course, that makes the next intrusive thought more important, not less. Because the emotional brain doesn't necessarily understand. It doesn't understand I checked because I was anxious. It learns I was anxious, I checked, and then I was safe. And that, of course, is a very different lesson. Alarm, compulsion, relief. Alarm, compulsion, relief. Alarm, compulsion, relief. And every repetition strengthens the simple connection. It's rather like a smoke alarm that sounds, and every single time it sounds, somebody runs into the room, checks everything, checks again, and then stands underneath it saying, "It's okay now." And imagine doing that every single time. Eventually, that alarm has trained the whole house. It makes a noise and everyone responds. But what happens when the alarm sounds and nobody performs the old routine? Well, at first the alarm may continue. Perhaps it becomes louder because, well, the brain expects something needs to happen now. And this is the point at which OCD has previously persuaded you, see, you can't leave this. You need to check. You need to know. You need to make sure. And perhaps that's exactly the point where new learning can simply begin. Because imagine the alarm sounds and you don't try to switch it off. You don't argue with it. You don't reassure it. You don't prove that there's no danger. You simply don't perform the old response. And you know, perhaps the alarm continues for a while, and that's okay. Because something very important is happening underneath. The brain is waiting for the old ending. And the old ending isn't coming. Intrusion, alarm, and then no compulsion. And now the brain has an opportunity to learn something it could never learn while the compulsion was taking place. It can discover, apparently this feeling can be here without me doing anything about it. And notice what you're not teaching it. We're not teaching everything is definitely safe. We're not teaching nothing bad could ever happen. We're not teaching that thought definitely means nothing, because that simply would be another form of reassurance. Another attempt to purchase certainty. Instead, the learning becomes, I don't need to know. And perhaps those 5 words can have a very different meaning now. Not I don't care. Not everything will definitely be fine. Simply, I don't need to know. Because OCD doesn't really offer certainty. It offers a transaction. Do this and I'll let you feel certain. Check once and perhaps you'll feel better. Then, are you absolutely sure? Check again. But did you check properly? Again. What if you miss something? Again. And each time you pay. And you pay with attention, with checking, with reassurance, with analysis. And OCD gives you a little temporary relief. And then it just sends you another bill. And perhaps with your mind you can recognise there is no final payment, because OCD's demand isn't really for reasonable certainty. It wants absolute certainty, 100%. No possibility, no doubt, no risk, no unanswered question. And you know, as humans, we simply can't work that way. You leave the house without absolute certainty about what will happen. You get into a car without absolute certainty. You eat food without absolute certainty. You trust people without absolute certainty. And you make decisions without absolute certainty every day. You tolerate already thousands of uncertainties without even noticing them. So the problem isn't uncertainty itself. The problem is that OCD has selected certain subjects and it's declared, here uncertainty is unacceptable. And perhaps that's the rule that can change. Not the thoughts, not the world, just the rule. I must know can become maybe I won't know. I must be certain can become I can continue without certainty. I need to make sure can become I'm choosing not to check. And there's an interesting distinction between certainty and confidence. Certainty says, I must know what will happen. Confidence says, whatever happens, I trust myself to deal with life as it comes. And you know, perhaps that's a much stronger place from which to live. Not trying to control every possibility, but developing confidence in your ability just to tolerate not knowing. And this is where something important begins to happen. The intrusive thought arrives, the alarm sounds, the urge to do something appears, and perhaps for just a moment, nothing happens. You don't have to fight thought. You don't even need to push it away. You don't need to convince yourself of anything. You simply allow the thought to be there without completing the old pattern. And you know, sometimes the most powerful learning comes from the response that doesn't happen. The intrusive thought comes and you don't analyse it. New learning. The doubt comes and you don't check. New learning. The urge to ask for reassurance comes and you allow the question to remain unanswered. New learning. The feeling that something isn't quite right comes and you continue anyway. New learning. And perhaps the anxiety rises and the old mind says, do something. And you begin to understand this is the moment. Not when the anxiety has disappeared, not when you feel certain, right here, while part of you still wants the reassurance. Because every time you resist buying that temporary relief, you're teaching the brain that the alarm can end without the compulsion. Perhaps you can become curious about an urge. You see, because this urge feels as though it demands action. But an urge isn't an instruction. It's just a sensation. It rises, changes, moves, and eventually falls. And you don't have to know exactly when it will fall. You don't need to monitor it. You simply allow it to do whatever it does, while you continue with whatever matters. And that may feel uncomfortable initially, of course, but you're breaking an old agreement. Look, OCD says, I'll give you relief if you give me a compulsion. And now, perhaps, you simply decline the deal. Not angrily, not dramatically. You simply don't buy. And every time you don't buy, something changes. Because without the compulsion, OCD cannot claim credit for the relief that eventually comes. And that is crucial. The anxiety rises, you don't perform the compulsion, and eventually, in its own time, the nervous system will settle. And of course, now the brain has evidence. I didn't check, and the feeling changed anyway. I didn't ask, and the feeling changed anyway. I didn't solve the thought, and I continued anyway. And perhaps that is how the loop begins to weaken. Not by eliminating the first thought, but by changing what happens next. So think intrusion, alarm, urge, and then choice. Intrusion, alarm, urge, and choice. And of course, each time there is a choice, there is an opportunity for new learning. Perhaps sometimes you'll choose differently, and you know that's okay. This isn't another test that you have to perform perfectly, because of course perfection itself can become another demand for certainty, and instead you simply become increasingly good. You become increasingly good at recognizing the moment when OCD asks you to make a purchase, and the purchase is, would you like some certainty? And perhaps more and more often your answer becomes, no thank you, I can live without it. And then you return to what you were doing. Not waiting to feel better, not checking whether the technique worked. Because checking whether you're no longer checking, well, that would be clever of OCD, wouldn't it? You simply continue. You simply let your brain learn in its own way, at its own level, that a thought can remain unfinished, a question can remain unanswered, an uncomfortable feeling can remain temporarily uncomfortable. And life can continue. Because the goal was never certainty. The goal is freedom from needing certainty. And perhaps that part of your mind that has been working so hard to protect you can begin learning something wonderfully simple. The alarm does not have to disappear for you to stop answering it. And maybe that's where something begins to change. Because you don't have to win a battle with your thoughts. You don't have to control them. You don't have to silence them. And you certainly don't have to answer every question that they bring. You simply begin to recognize, I have a choice about what happens next. And every time you make that choice, something new is being learned, perhaps quietly at first, perhaps almost unnoticed. A little less checking, a little less analysing, a little less reassurance, a little more willingness to leave something unfinished, unanswered, uncertain. And gradually, what once felt urgent can begin to feel less important. What once demanded an answer can become something you simply notice and leave alone. Not because you've found the perfect answer, just because you're beginning to discover you never needed one. And there is freedom in that. The freedom to have a thought without having to follow it. The freedom to experience uncertainty without having to resolve it. The freedom to feel an urge without having to act upon it. And the freedom to turn your attention back toward your own life. Toward the people you care about, the things you enjoy, the things you want to accomplish, the ordinary moments that perhaps OCD has interrupted, but never truly owned. Because there is so much more to you than the thoughts that happen to pass through your mind. And there is so much more to life than trying to make absolutely certain that everything will be okay. Perhaps real confidence was never about knowing with absolute certainty what will happen next. Perhaps confidence is knowing that you can meet whatever comes next. And you don't have to change everything today. You don't have to do this perfectly. You simply begin. One unanswered question. One check you don't repeat. One reassurance you decide not to seek. One moment when uncertainty is allowed to remain. Just while you carry on living anyway. And then another. And another. And with every one of those moments, your mind has the opportunity to learn, to update, to discover that the old response is no longer necessary. And perhaps there will come a time when you suddenly realise you haven't been thinking about whether you're getting better because you've been too busy just living. And maybe that's how change happens sometimes. Not with one dramatic moment, but quietly, naturally. As the things that once occupied so much of your attention begin taking up less and less space, leaving more room for you, more room for the present, more room for possibility, more room for the life that's just been waiting for your attention. And perhaps you can allow yourself just for a moment to become curious about that future. Not needing to know exactly what it looks like, not needing certainty about how or when. Simply knowing that change is possible, that learning has already begun, and that every time you choose not to answer the alarm, you are moving in a different direction toward greater confidence, greater freedom, and a quieter relationship with your own mind. Because you don't need certainty to move forward. You only need to begin moving forward. And you already are. And now, as this time of calm and focus begins to draw to a close, you can allow all the useful changes from this session to continue settling quietly in the background of your mind. There's no need to think about them. They're already integrating naturally and becoming part of the way you think, feel, and respond. So the body begins to re-energize now, the mind clearing, the breath deepening, and you may start to notice small movements returning, a shift of the shoulders, maybe a swallow, or maybe the fingers or toes beginning to move. And as you reconnect with the room around you, you bring this calm awareness with you, clear, balanced, steady. And in a moment I'm going to count from 1 to 5, and with each number your energy will rise, your sharpness focus, and you return to full alertness, calm, refreshed and clear-headed. So 1, taking a deeper breath. 2, feeling energy return through the body. That's it. 3, becoming aware of your surroundings. 4, your eyes beginning to blink. Mind bright, body refreshed. And 5, eyes open now, fully awake, calm, clear, and ready to move forward.